Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We're live on Facebook. We'll be starting in 5 more minutes. Let us wait for more participants to join.
Yeah, sure.
So let's start the conversation at least. So I want all participants to interact and put in their questions if they have any. We'll surely take all the questions at the end of the session. If the question is relevant in the between, sure the speakers will be taking the questions. You can always send in your questions in the chat box, which is given on the right hand side. How many of the participants are from UAE? If they can just type yes in the chat box. Okay, we have participants from UAE. I welcome you all. So we'll be starting the session in approximately 3 minutes from now. By the time I'll just introduce everyone and myself. So hi, I am Chitanya. I'm the brand solution manager at CA Club India. Today we are going to have this session on economic substance regulation by GCC Fintechs. Now GCC Fintechs is an initiative by CA Club India for Gulf countries. It's the first dedicated platform to share information, articles, and ideas and experiences on the various topics of tax and finance, which is targeting all the 6 GCCs. Today, in this session, will be conducted by two very reputed speakers, which is Mr. Rajiv and Mr. Neerav. Talking about the speakers, Mr. Neerav is a qualified chartered accountant specialized in international tax and finance with a total of 18 years of experience in working like companies like KPMG, Dimetson, and as a vice president. And now, Mr. Neerav is a director at Fame Advisory, DCC. Now, again, then we have Mr. Rajiv Hira, who's a very high caliber strategic tax and finance professional with the experience of in the leading roles in private multinational finance institution for over 20 years in the area of risk management, compliance, investment analysis, investment management, tax advisory, VAT advisory, and management consulting. So I welcome you, Mr. Neerav and Mr. Rajiv.
Thank you.
So we can, today's session is on economic substance. We can start the session.
Yes, of course. Okay, so between us, I will take the lead and I will start the session and give you an overview of what ESR is all about. And then my colleague Rajiv is also a close friend. He will then chip in and cover the rest of the activities and then also the procedural part of the subject. So looking forward to have an interactive session, and if you all have any questions or anything, please feel free to ask us and stop us in between if it is relevant at that point in time, or we can take it up always at the later stage, So thank you all, first of all, for sparing some time today afternoon and increasing your awareness about the economic substance regulations. And we hope to cover the subject in next 1 hour or so, and then we'll move into the Q&A part of the session. Okay. Um, Today we are going to cover the background of ESR and why it was introduced. Relevant activities, there are 9 of them. I will cover about 5 or 6 of them, and Rajiv will cover the rest. Then what are the requirement of meeting us, fulfilling the economic substance test? What are the offenses and penalties, and what are the implementation update in UAE about this, and the sample format of notification which one needs to file at this moment in time. As you all are aware, the deadline is approaching and we are required to file, all the companies, most of the companies are required to file by 30th of June. In some free zones and all wanted it earlier, so like DIFC want its licensees to file it by 12th of June, and so on and so forth. We'll cover all those details in some time. First, let me go to the basics of why there was a need for UAE and similar countries to introduce a legislation like economic substance regulations. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is OECD, had commenced its base erosion and profit shifting project way back in 2012. In fact, it was led by realization for most of the developed nations that a lot of multinationals are using the tax benefits available in different countries to their advantage and are paying minimum amount of taxes. And the leading was, of course, US corporates like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Starbucks, and all of them. And therefore, this entire project was initiated. It went on, and a lot of countries and the representative debated about various parts. And by end of 2015, the 15 action points were identified. So in 2016, OECD mandated all members to start implementing action points and join a multilateral instrument, which is one common document through which they amend all the existing tax treaties, which are bilateral document, which is signed by different countries to grant certain benefits to each other and their residents. Now, so on the other end, out of 15, OECD mandated that all countries should join the initiative and at least implement the 4 of the 15 action points. These 4 mandatory or minimum action points were harmful tax practices, prevention of treaty abuse, and country by country reporting and mutual agreement process. Now, this was supposed to be implemented by everyone, and they started contacting each countries at different point in time and using all sort of measures to follow this requirements that OECD has. So under OECD Action 5, harmful tax practices, which is one of the 4 minimum actions, OECD delegated the investigation of this entire harmful tax practices to the EU Code of Conduct Group. The Code of Conduct Group studied over 120 regimes which were prevalent in various countries, and it identified certain of them which were harmful from a tax perspective. And then they started working with each of the governments on an individual basis to convince them to join this initiative to scrap or amend their harmful tax practices and be in line with everybody else, And here they identified that there were a set of countries which levied low or no taxes. Now, it was very easy for anybody to operate establish a company there, and without having a sufficient substance, book profits or margins or transactions there. And therefore, one of the coercive measure which OECD and the Code of Conduct Group in EU took was to publish a list of countries which are not cooperating with this initiative. So they were put on a gray list with certain timeline and certain targets given to achieve. And if they don't achieve that, then they would move in and push them onto a blacklist. So from GCC, UAE and Bahrain also were considered as offshore center having low or no taxes and were put on similar list by EU. Now, for any countries to get out of this list, they had to introduce economic substance regulations and country by country reporting standards. So what the Code of Conduct Group laid down as a minimum guidance was that there has to be a real economic activity for any profits to be booked in those jurisdictions. There has to be substantial economic presence in terms of resources available to this company. And there has to be a nexus or a link between the real activity and the uh, tax benefits which are availed by being in those countries. And therefore, there was always a control and management test which was to be applied who were carrying on this kind of activity. So, during the year 2018, they published the Code of Conduct Group, published first grey list and put countries on that list. And that's as a result of that, UAE was contacted at a government level, but UAE was quite proactive and came back and joined the BEPS inclusive framework in May 10, 2018 itself, by which it has agreed to implement all the minimum 4 actions which were prescribed. So in April 2019, as a corollary to that, government introduced 2 of the cabinet resolution 31 and 32, one for economic substance resolution and second for country by country report legislation. Country by country report is mainly for the transfer pricing purposes, where multinational groups having certain turnover above certain limits, which from a UAE perspective, it's almost about $800 million and above level, and having operations in various countries, they need to comply with. But ESR is something that all the licensee in UAE will need to comply with. Further, what is not so much known is that your Ministry of Finance in UAE signed the multilateral instrument in June 2018, whereby in all its treaties that UAE has signed, the double tax conventions, UAE has signed almost, so there are almost 104 treaties which UAE has, out of which about 90 of them are active, which are signed between various countries, with various countries. The effect of signing the multilateral instrument is such that all of these treaties will stand amended to include a principal purpose test, which means that any entity who is using or availing benefits under the tax treaty is not established only for availing those tax benefits. And there is other larger commercial or business purpose to having established that entity in that jurisdiction, and then only the treaty benefit will be granted. And therefore, the treaty will not be abused for taking any benefits. So these were the 2 main things. And then, of course, they agreed to improve the dispute resolution mechanism through a mutual agreement procedure. The mutual agreement procedures were always there in the treaties, but there was no time limit to it. Now, under the multilateral instrument, now there is a time limit of maximum of 24 months, within which 2 of the government have to, or the tax authorities of the 2 government have to come together and resolve the dispute, which any of the resident or companies are facing. So, as a result of all these actions being taken by UAE was removed from the grey list on 10th of October 2018, post review of this laws by the OECD and the EU Code of Conduct Group. The other discussion was that why this 9 activities were selected, and how did somebody came to zero it down to only this 9 activity to be part of the ESR regulation. So again, as I mentioned, that Code of Conduct Group had research over 120 regimes, and they identified that which are the activities which are geographically mobile, which is very commonly used for taking the tax benefits. Now, maximum debate and research was around the intellectual property related items, but these were the 9 activities which were found to be geographically mobile, and hence this were included as part of the required or relevant activities under the economic substance regulations. We'll go into the details of all of this in some time. ESR applies to all the entities having financial year commencing on or after 1st of January 2019. The Cabinet of Ministers resolution came in April 2019. First guidance on this was issued by Ministry of Finance on 12th of September. Thereafter, around December and January, the FAQs were issued and licensing authorities were named. And as late as March, as we know, the relevant activity guides have been published by the Ministry of Finance. So all of this is trying to help spread awareness and letting people know how to comply, what gets covered, what does not get covered. And this is the basis for our discussions at the moment. So who needs to comply? Any natural or jurisdictional person licensed by a competent licensing authority in the UAE to carry out a relevant activity is supposed to comply, whether it is in free zone or a financial free zone or offshore, everybody needs to comply. So these are the countries which introduced this legislation in 2019, along with UAE and Bahrain, and all of them are implementing it from the current year, which is 2020, which is the year of compliance. These are the 9 main activities, which is banking, insurance, investment fund, lease finance, headquarter, and shipping business, and then holding company, then intellectual property and distribution and service center. We will go into the details of this and what gets covered and what gets excluded in each of this for you to understand better. So only exemption available under ESR is for the companies in which federal government or government of any emirate of UAE or any of the government authority, a body, owns more than 51% in its shareholding. These entities are specifically excluded from any of the compliance under the ESR under this regulations. Let's quickly move into the activities. So banking business. Banking business here is defined to mean business of accepting deposit of money which may be withdrawn or they are repayable on demand or for any such period by check or otherwise, and the use of said deposit either in whole or part in making or giving loans, advances, overdrafts, guarantees or similar facilities, or making investment on their own account. Now, as we all are aware, in UAE under the current licensing regulations, only a central bank can issue a license to somebody to operate a commercial bank, or in the financial free zone, the relevant financial authorities are designated to issue such licenses, and only those people who has relevant licenses are allowed to carry on such banking business. So those will be covered, and therefore those who are not covered are all money exchanges, because they are only doing exchange of remitting currency, and all the financial intermediaries which are like stockbrokers or which help you purchase or sell any domestic or foreign stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities or anything. So all of them are not covered, right? And again, if licensee is part of a banking group and if he also does other activities, then all of that will get combined and will be reported only at one place. But those who are doing only advisory and arranging other services to client but not doing banking here. So a lot of banks have branches here which do not do full-fledged banking, but they only provide advisory and arranging services, and therefore they may not be covered in the banking business per se, but they may end up getting covered in some other relevant activity like service center or a few others, so one needs to be careful about that part. So again, under each activity, the regulations have defined what are the core income generating activities. Now, why this is important, this SIGA is very important, is because if you are covered within the regulations, the first stage of compliance is to file the notification. The second stage of compliance is that you need to file an economic substance return. In that, the entity needs to demonstrate that this core income generating activity, the core activities for this relevant activity of banking or whichever, have actually been carried on in UAE. And that's when the substance requirement is met and not otherwise. And therefore, this definition of this, each of this income generating activity is very important, as that will help you to fulfill your obligations at a later point in time. So again, core income generating activity, or SIGA as it is known, for banking business are this four, which is raising funds, managing risk, including credit, currency, and interest rate risk, taking any hedging position, providing loans, credit, or other financial services, and managing capital and preparing reports to investors, right, or government authority. So these are the core activities which one must carry on within UAE. Similarly, for insurance business, now we move into, again, insurance is a regulated business, and one needs to obtain a license from either a UAE insurance authority or with the regulatory authority in DIFC or ADGM, which are the financial free zone, which is the DFSA and Financial Services Regulatory Authority in Abu Dhabi. So any of this can issue a license to somebody to carry on um, the business of insurance, which is accepting risk for life or non-life sector, and it includes reinsurance and captive insurance arrangements. Now, important point here is that insurance brokers and agents will not be covered. Only the insurance companies which are actually accepting this kind of risk, either for life or for non-life. So any type of risk is covered, whether it is only life or marine or shipping or cargo or any related risk, or even your medical or health insurance which is provided. So any of those insurance companies providing this service are covered within this activity. But those who are insurance brokers who get client for such insurance companies are not covered. And therefore, they do not fall within the insurance business category per se. And again, to prevent any duplicate reporting, if they are also, the insurance business is also doing other services, then only the main activity needs to be reported and not anything else. So again, for insurance business, what are the main core income generating activity is predicting and calculating risk, insuring or reinsuring against risk of providing insurance business services to our clients, and underwriting insurance and reinsurance. The way the insurance industry functions is that a lot of this function of predicting and calculating risk is generally carried out by a professional actuary who may or may not be available handily in UAE, and they may have been using their group resources in UK or other places to avail these services. And therefore, it might become challenging for some who does not have these people on their board, and therefore might find it difficult to meet this requirements of the SIGA being carried on in UAE. And there are also other nuances of similar nature when we look at other parts of it. Moving on to investment fund management business. Here again, the one which is doing the fund management business is covered, and therefore pure fund in itself is not covered within this activity. So again, it's a regulated entity. You need licenses either from Security and Contract Authority in UAE on the mainland side, SCA, or you need from the regulatory authority of the financial free zone to issue a license in this behalf, and then only somebody can conduct this business. And as I mentioned very clearly, it has to be the investment manager. And the investment manager who is carrying on the management business of the investment, which is doing actually purchase or sale of the investments and other things, are covered here, and not the fund per se. And therefore, even a fund which is structured as a partnership and has both general partner and the fund manager, then only the fund manager will be covered. If it is a self-managed fund, yes, of course, then the fund along with the manager will be covered. So again, the core income generating activity for investment fund business is investment fund management business is taking decisions on holding and selling of investment, calculating the risk and the reserves, taking decision on currency or interest fluctuation and hedging positions, preparing reports to any investor or government authorities. So all of this again needs to be carried out from UAE to meet the requirements. The next more interesting is the lease finance business. Now, while we understand that lease finance business is generally a regulated business and one needs specific license for that. However, the definition here of lease finance is very, very wide. So anybody that offers credit or financing for any kind of consideration, and it includes intra-group financing as well. So any offering of credit or finance, including making loans to either related or unrelated parties, entering into any finance leasing relations or in relation to any assets other than land, and providing credit in form of hire purchase agreements, all of this is covered as long as there is an expectation of earning a compensation for providing such credit or financing. Again, here also the term is very wide. It's not necessary that one should only earn interest. So it could also be a processing fee or origination fee, or like in Sharia compliant financing, you charge profit, that also is covered. Or if you have agreed with the recipient that you will convert this loan into a share capital at a later date, which is including that compensation, all of this kind of compensation, whether in direct or indirect form, is covered in this activity. And therefore, okay, only one point here is that merely granting a security in favor of a lender is not a consideration. So if I have a subsidiary and I give a guarantee or security for that, that's not a sufficient consideration to meet this. Okay. So again, what is important to realize here is that some of these items may not be specifically mentioned in your license activity, but entire of this regulation is being implemented as substance over form. And therefore, one should not only look at the license activity, but also look at what does the company do in effect and what is it carrying on as a result. This might get applied to a lot of businesses. And again, as we are already in the middle of the 2020, where a lot of this transaction would have already taken place in the last year when the applicability started, it may not even be possible to reverse them. And therefore, one will need to report under this category. Therefore, this is something which has very wide application when it comes to coverage. So it's not merely the license part, but also where people have not been able to specifically mention this as part of their license, but still carrying on this kind of activity. Now, again, here investment in just in bonds or equities just for investment purposes is not considered as a lease finance business. Okay. Main 5 core income generating activity here is agreeing the funding terms, identifying and acquiring the assets to be leased, setting the terms and durations, monitoring and revising any agreement, and managing any risk. Another important business is the headquarter business. Again, none of the licensing authorities give a license specifically for a headquarter business in UAE. So here again, one will need to look at substance over the form, and one will need to look at what the company actually does in practice as the determining criteria for determining whether this kind of business is being carried on or not. So if a licensee is providing services which is of management nature to its foreign group company, and through these services, if it takes on responsibility for overall success of the group and responsible for an important aspect of overall group's performance, like risk management and others, so then it is falling within the headquarter business. So what does it mean? Are you providing senior management time or services to other entities? Are you assuming or controlling any material risk that the subsidiaries or group companies have? Or are you providing any substantive advice in relation to their risk management, which the with the companies in the group are doing? So if you are doing any of this, then you will fall under the headquarter business. We do believe that a lot of UAE businesses have regional responsibilities. So a lot of multinationals who have set up their regional head offices here, or even the homegrown UAE large business houses, which have a lot of entities outside of UAE, which they control and manage from UAE. So all of this are likely to get covered under the headquarter ambit if some of these senior management functions are being performed from UAE. Here again, your position in the corporate structure is not at all important, and whether you are a parent or ultimate parent for any of them again is not important. He need not be a direct or ultimate parent, and therefore again substance over form of what one actually carries on is important here and not anything else. 3 of the core income generating activity for headquarter businesses: taking relevant management decision, incurring the operating expenditure on behalf of group and not merely capital expenditure, and coordinating the group activities from here. So these are again important activities for one to know. Then we come to shipping business. Here it is comparatively straightforward that they have specifically covered what gets covered in the shipping business. So what ships are included or excluded? So what is excluded first is the fishing ships, small ships which are less than 10 tons of tonnage, and leisure vessels of all cruise ships and private yachts are out of this purview. So all the other ships which are in the business of operating either passenger or goods in the international traffic, so any of them which are either doing rental or charter on a charter ship, charter basis of ships, sale of tickets or similar document, use or maintenance of rental of container, and management of crew of ships. All of this is covered within the shipping business here. Very important to note that chartering ship on a bareboat basis is not falling within the shipping business, but time and voyage charter, therefore, by default, will fall within this. Travel agency and international shipping agencies, which only sell tickets or sell slots, are not covered here. But the shipping lines or the people who actually take the cargo, move it to the location, are all covered here. Okay. These are the 4 SIGA for shipping activities, which is managing crew, overhauling and maintenance of the ships, overseeing, tracking the shipping, and determining what goods to order and when to deliver them, or organizing these voyages. Okay. I will take this as the last topic for me, then Rajiv will take over from here after this. So last here is for me is holding company. Because again, we are keeping time in our view. It's the first 30 minutes. I'll stop here, then Rajiv will cover the balance of the thing, and then we can quickly go into the Q&A to handle whatever queries that you have. Here in holding company is very, very specific, and it has a very limited application. Of course, it will cover a lot of people, but very limited application. Why we say that is that a holding company has to be only licensed to carry out such activity. The primary function has to be only acquisition and holding of shares or equity shares or equitable interest, and it should not be carrying on any other activity. So if it carries on any other activity, then it falls outside the purview of the holding company business. Further, it should only earn dividend and capital gain out of this equity interest as its revenue. So if it carries on other activity, then it is not part of the holding company business, but it may be going to fall in any other relevant activity. Therefore, for a holding company business, the substance requirements are reduced, and you do not need to show the control and management aspect of it, but only having the resources at your disposal, and you're doing all the compliances that is required as part of this activity. So there are 2 types of holding companies: one which derives income from other sources, and one which has only income, and only income is dividend and capital gain. So if it derives income from any other sources, that's not covered in the holding company business. Only if you are earning dividend and capital gain, then only you will be covered here, and not otherwise. Okay. This is the test. So if there are 5 examples which are given, which is if you're holding immovable asset and you are earning income from rent of that, that's not covered because you're not holding any equity interest. So this is not covered within the holding company. If you're holding movable assets and you have income from movable assets, which is finance lease or income from other sale of movable assets, it might get covered under the lease finance business, but not under the holding company business. If you hold intellectual property assets, again, these are not equity interests. So you might get covered in the IP business, which we are going to talk next, but you're not covered under the holding company. So if you only hold equity interest and you only have income from equity only, then only you're covered under the holding company business. And if you also carry on any other activity which is not part of this 9 relevant activity, then also you're outside the purview of the holding company activity. I hope that clears everything. So now I'll hand over to Rajiv to take it over from IP to complete the activities, and then take over the procedural part of the segment. Rajiv, I'll stop the share, then you can start from your computer.
Thank you. Is it my screen visible?
Yes, screen is visible. Put it on the slideshow
Sure.
mode and go further down. We are still on the shipping. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. Now you can start.
So I'll pick on the intellectual property. Thanks, Neeraj, for picking up and giving a good perspective on what all and what not. I think that's more important than anything else. From an intellectual property perspective, there are a lot of ambiguity, you can say, and this is the most riskiest preposition, or you can say relevant activity being defined by the regulator. This is the only activity where, irrespective of whether you prove the substance or not, the reporting to the respective country will go through. So we will look at what and why, and what are the implications which come from intellectual property. First thing first, we need to identify what is the business from an intellectual property perspective. So the regulation talks about if you earn any income which is a separatable income. So that's a very important point which they refer to. It should be a separate income which is earned from any of the intangible asset generation income, which can be copyright, patent, trademark, brands, technical know-how, whatever we talk about. So these are just some of the inclusive numbers. These are not the total numbers or all numbers we are talking about. So when we look at first the intellectual property, uh, are we doing a business in any of these activities where we are earning an income which is a separatable income? Now, it's a very important point which comes as a separatable income. It's a very relevant from a UAE perspective, because as we know, because of prevention of the brand, because of prevention of international market, people, what they intend to do is they register their brands or logos or IP rights in their company name. However, the objective of registering that brand is to protect themselves, not to sell those IP rights. So if that is not the case, then we will not qualify that to be an IP business, because that IP is not the main activity. It's just an integral part of the overall business. So that's what the legislation very clearly says. The checkpoint, yes, do we have a IP rights or not? Perfectly fine. It may be you have already registered an IP right, but however, that IP right is not sold as an individual item. So that's a critical thing which comes as identifying or differentiating whether IP rights is an income generating model or it's the only model through which the income is generated. So both have a different aspects. Now, once we identify it's a IP, then we need to look at whether it's a high risk IP or not. So this is where everyone globally is concerned on a high risk IP. So we'll look at what are the parameters being given from a high risk IP perspective. Article 1, which is the main ministerial document from a ESR perspective. In the definition section itself, they have clearly elaborated what is high risk IP. So we'll go through the slide. If you see, I'm talking about only condition A. In this condition A, you need to meet all of the following three requirements. So there are three sets of questions which are being said. If all three requirements are jointly compliant, then only you will qualify as part of high risk IP. The first, which talks about how you have created the IP. So we need to look at how the IP is created. So the licensee did not create the intellectual property asset, or he has created. If he has created, then this answer will not be a tick box or will not meet. But however, you have not created, that means someone else has created and you have hold it up or acquired. So that means if I have not created, my tick box comes as yes. If the licensee has acquired the IP, the first is how it's created, the second comes is how it's acquired. In this case, acquired from any of the related or group companies. So if it is acquired from a related or group companies, again, it becomes a tick box. If it is acquired or purchased or traded with a non-related party, this again goes as no. So if the second question also goes as yes, that means you acquired from a group company or which is situated in a foreign jurisdiction. And third, or the last thing which comes is the licensee licenses or sold. So it's not only that you have sold the license in one go, but you are earning on monthly basis some license fees or royalty or whatever name you call about from a foreign group company. So if all these three conditions are met, you are getting bound into the high risk IP business activity. So the moment high risk business activity comes, there are some do's and don'ts which comes in, will play it out. So this is one condition. So if you meet all these three conditions, if you see in the point number 2, any one condition compliance is going to attract you. That means it's a group company or development is done by another person who's situated in a foreign jurisdiction. So this is or. So first condition, second condition, any of one, third condition, if all these three conditions are met, you are part of a high risk business. There is one more condition which comes in the same article, which is in the definition, which is condition number B. which also says the licensee did not carry out the research and development or branding, marketing, and distribution as part of its state core income generating activity. So this is the only section in the you can say relevant activity business which goes and talks, or you can give the reference to the core income generating activity. So technically speaking, core income generating activity is my testing phase. It's not a relevant activity phase, but in this case we have to check it. So that means when I generated my income, I have not used any of the resources or activity within UAE to create the license. So that's where it comes into. So if you see the point number A and point number B, if any of these conditions on a standalone basis are met, you are being classified as a high risk IP business. So that's where it comes into, or that's where the action plan plays out. Now, what happens if we are into a high risk business? The first condition which goes up, or it's a very important to understand, is the by default you are deemed to be failed the ESR test. So by default they will say that you have failed the ESR test because one, they have already checked whether the core income generating activity is linking or not. Second, it's a high risk business and it's getting into a quite a global phenomena where the maximum money laundering business or tax evasion business is happening through this channel. So the moment you fail, the section very clearly says any high risk IP license is by default deemed to have failed the ESR test, resulting in competent authority exchanging information. That's an example. If your parent entity or the related entity is in other geography, example Germany, then the data will be shared with the German competent authorities, which may be Ministry of Finance, Economy, or Taxation Department in those countries, about what business you are conducting or carrying out from a UAE perspective. So this is the immediate trigger point which comes into. So that's a reason if you see in the notification form, high risk IP or IP business is the main tick box as a separate item which is being classified, or you need to identify them at the notification stage itself. Moving further, let's look at what once we are classified as doing a business in a intellectual property or in a high risk intellectual property business, we need to substantiate the core income generating activity. Now, the core income generating activity is being defined again in the Article 5, which says that if it's a patent, had you done a research and development in the country? If it is a non-trade intangible assets, example, it can be a brand, trademark, logo, whatever. Had you done a branding, marketing, and distribution of that within the country? So the UAE business should have that kind of a flavor or a core income generating activity through this model. Further it goes, if it's a high risk IP, then you have to test something more. That means that taking strategic decision and managing should happen within the UAE, which includes the development and subsequent exploration. So when you have a IP, it's not only what you have done, but how you further can generate the income or what kind of a models you are operating. Next comes acquisition by third parties and subsequent exploration. So if you are taking a strategic decision, the principal risk lies with the person who is acquiring the IP rights. And the next comes carrying on ancillary trading activities through which intangible assets are exploited, leading to generation of income from third party. So let's say example, you have an IP right is being generated, you have got a software or a technology being framed out, how you are selling, how you are renting, how you are leasing, or how you are licensing that activity to generate this income. So this SIGA becomes a very critical and very important point from a IP risk perspective. I think IP is the most stringent. I will not say it's a difficult, but I think they're exploring it to be much more potential for tax evasions or tax manipulations or the money laundering aspect, which OECD frames it out, and that's why it has given a very high prominence in the whole activity of 9 items. Further, some examples, like if we talk about, as we talked about, decision making or periodic decision making by a non-resident director would not suffice in the high risk IP business. So high risk IP business should have a in-country directors or people as a part of a substance test. So the substance test is very, very important, which goes into the IP business. Next comes ownership of such intellectual property would not be considered as carrying on intellectual property. So in case example, if you have a trademark or something which is there, the value of goods or services which you are selling. I'll give a very a classic example which we talked before also. I'm holding a business, I hold an intellectual property, I'm using that intellectual property for generating the business which I'm working on. Example, I'm into an automobile industry. I got a design patented in for manufacturing of a vehicle. I'm selling the vehicle or I'm selling the design. That depends which kind of a intellectual property business comes into and how the ownership of intellectual property is considered. Moving to the next, the last and the most important, I think, I'll not say important, but this is touching more lives than any other services, is what people believe. So that's where it goes into. Distribution and service, there are technically two elements which comes as part of it. One is distribution and second is service. In the distribution business, it talks about if a licensee is purchasing the raw material or finished goods from a foreign group company or a foreign connected party. Now, the first thing which comes is what is the definition of connected party? We'll go through and we will just talk about that also in a while. Second, within the section comes in the service center business. So are we providing any services which can be a consulting, administrative, or any other services to the foreign group or connected party? So again, they have used a very clear definition. It should be the group company or a connected party. If you're doing this business with a third party, then you are not getting attracted to distribution and service center business. So that's a very clear indication which comes into. They are looking at only the nexus where the trade or the business is done to maybe circumvent the taxes or move the profits from a X location to Y location. In this case, there are some special points which we need to be considered. The licensee that only purchases goods from or distribute goods to third party, this is what I talked about, will not be considered as engaged in distribution business. Similarly, for service also, if you are providing services to a third party, you will not be considered as part of the distribution and service sector activity. An entity that undertakes and would be required to demonstrate economic substance test. So what they have done is a one-off transaction or the transaction which are not in the ordinary course of business are excluded. Example, I'm normally doing a business with my with the third parties. However, I have a group company based in Singapore, and one of the transaction I take a support or provide services to them. If it's a one-off transaction, I can substantiate from the profitability perspective, maybe from the transaction perspective, or maybe from the sequence perspective. Then that should not be considered as a that should not be considered so that the whole distribution and service activity gets attracted. So you can exclude. However, it's most important to have the documentation. What kind of a documentation you're using, what kind of a analogy you're keeping with yourself to prove it to be a one-off transaction. You can't have like, okay, I have a $1 million of sale, but I did a $10 million of one-off transaction with my group company. So that cannot be constituted as one-off transaction because the value and the number both has to be looked at how the transaction is being done. Again, there are some duplication rules which they have said. If you are doing some activity and you have other relevant activity also, you can exclude and only classify as one distribution activity example, which is fairly fine. Now comes the question on what is connected party. So as per resolution number 31 of ESR, which clearly says a natural or judicial person. So it can be a company, it can be a warm body who is related to one or more natural or judicial persons through directly or indirect ownership or control or common control. So we go back to the AML terminology or a customer due diligence terminology, which talks about how this common jurisdiction or common people are being identified. So you need to identify the UBO, so that is ultimate beneficial owner, and see what kind of a control or what kind of a percentage it is mentioned. Although the law does not talk about what percentages are to be considered to identify whether this is a group company or not, there is definitely a link which is established, which is available within the AML framework from a UAE perspective, which talks about 25%. So now 25% of ownership or control, both has to be looked at. We can't say only the shareholding I will look at. We need to look at the control also, which can be board of directors, which can be the manager. So what kind of a common control factors which are baked in, that also need to be looked at to identify whether these are commonly connected or not. So this is an interpretation. Again, we are not talking about This is mentioned in the law. How we have connected this 25%, how we identified this 25%. We have picked up the line item from a recommendation 10 of FATF, and the UAE money laundering section, or the document we have referred to. Here it clearly identifies that the common ownership or the beneficial ownership of 25% is good enough to identify it to be a common person. So this is again an interpretation, just a matter of caution. This is not in the law. People can take their own calls on how it need to be adopted. So as per, if you understand and we agree that 25% is right, then first step is identify beneficial owner or natural person of the entity. Then you identify whether any individual or a related entity is jointly holding 25% or more. Then you review a profile, maybe the board of directors or the directors or managers, and see whether there is any common interest or a common control which is coming up. Now, there are some critical things which can be looked at. Example, there are some natural person relationship also being constituted. If example, there is a minor, and if the minor is holding a certain percentage, can we constitute the person who is controlling that minor, or a father or a guardian, to be holding to be exercising the control, to be precise on that. So that's what comes into. So this is the interpretation, again, just to make it a cautious approach. Now, once we identify the relevant activity, we need to anyway go for a notification, say yes, and all those ESR forms has to be filled in. But now what need to be done to see that we pass the test? From a testing perspective, there are 3 activities which are defined in distribution and 1 in the service sector. So from a distribution perspective, transporting and storing goods, components and material or goods ready for sale should be there in the country. Managing inventory should be in the country, taking orders in the country. So if these are any of these activities you are doing, you can call it a core income generating activity. And from a service perspective, you're providing services or administrative services within UAE. So if these are the income you are generating, then it's perfectly fine. You are meeting the test of SIGA also. Now, economic substance test, the substance test requirement are a little bit different in the various categories, but what we will do is we will take a common approach and see how things are. I'm cautious of the time also, because we need to ensure that we give enough of time for the Q&A also. So the company should be directed and managed in the UAE in specific activities. So that's where it comes into. So there should be maybe a board of directors, or the people who are controlling should be available from a UAE perspective. The company SIGA should be performed in the UAE, so that we have seen as a SIGA compliance activity. The company have an adequate level of qualified employees. Now, what is adequate? That's a very interesting word, which is used by in the ESR legislation at the various places. Now, adequacy is again a subjective story. We need to look at how we define that subject and how we prove it from a documentary perspective. For some entities, maybe I'll say a graduate will be enough from a qualification perspective, but in some cases you may say that no, I need a trade expert to do the certain set of activities. So those are the assumptions, or you can say the documentation perspective need to be looked at. There are 2-3 factors which we are normally recommending how to be approached. One is which industry you're talking about. See as a parallels what is happening in the industry with the other peer group, how those peer group is connecting with those activities to call it a qualified. It comes as a premises also. So example, if I have a business activity which is more a field job, can I have a smaller premises? Yes. But if I need to have a physical presence of my employees, do I have enough of space? I'm sure with COVID, the space requirement will be increasing much more as we thought about. Moving to further section on, there is a completely an annual requirement, which is we need to see the relevant activity, gross income in relation to relevant activity, the date of the end of this financial year. So these are the requirements which will flow through as the return period comes into. We have some sample return which will show you and reflect it out. Typically, this is a test of 12 months. So as 2019 notifications we are submitting from 1st January 2019 to 31st December 2019. Before 31st December 2020, the test has to be test reports, or the reports has to be submitted, which will be the return format, which will be quite extensive. It's not going to be the simple yes and no document, which we have seen right now, because we need to segregate the income. We need to show some of the parameters, how we say the economic substance test is met. There are some disclosure forms. What we will do, we'll just go through the form which is there. We are not taking to the penalties right now. Let's comply to the law right now. Just a snapshot of some of the dates where the notification is getting due or is already being passed through. Dubai Airport Free Zone 31st May has already passed through. I think Dubai South or Aviation City is coming very nearby 7th June, and DIFC is 12th June. Balance all you can see it's the 30th June is what we will look at. Mainland also has come up from a legislation from a notification perspective, and again the dates are 30th June, which are being defined. Now let's look at some of the forms which are used by various authorities. We have picked up DIFC. It's a little bit comprehensive form, but we will pick up the other side of form also. In DIFC, you can go to the website which is being we have mentioned in the here also in the presentation. So once you go there, there is a different online portal which they have created. So there is a customer portal. You have to go and update in the customer portal itself for DIFC. ADGM, there is a physical form which is available again in their website. We are given the link. You can even search in the Google, write ADGM economic substance. You will be able to get to the link and see the forms which are available. So we have just attached the form which is there in the website. Now this is the common form which is being predominantly circulated by maximum ministries or maximum free zones, and even the mainland companies are supposed to use this form. Quick snapshot, not too much of information is there except for the licensee name, license number, their address, and which goes to the relevant period. So when you see the first relevant period, which is item number 3, we have to mention which month and year the period closes. Example, let's say if someone is 31st December, mention 31st December, that's it. And then the relevant period which comes into, which is next item, which is from 1st January 2019 till 31st December 2019. Tick all the relevant activity which you feel is applicable, yes or no. And are they being taxed outside? So in some cases, what we have noticed, the income of UAE business is being clubbed in the group level, and they are paying taxes in those respective jurisdictions. These predominantly we have seen at the branch level, but definitely it's important to look at, is there any consolidation happening, and are you paying income in the home country? So this is the important section. Normally we don't know, so it's good to ask the client, and even the client sometimes has to go back to his group company to ask this answer. So which is an important integral part. And if you see the next section comes the high risk IP. So that's again an element, and further details are manager details, and also will not get into that one. Now this is a Bahrain form which is being defined. This is available in the open search also. You can pick it up. This is basically a return form. This is not a notification form, quite an extensive one. We have just included as part of the presentation, so you can look at it, how it is being defined and designed. It goes quite extensively. If you see, the first is a relevant activity, the same standard question comes into, and then you have to provide the details based on the documentation or the incomes which are being generated. So there is a lot of verbatim which is there, there's a lot of story which comes into there, and the test, or you can say the result, has to be mentioned. So these are, you can say you are doing a self-attestation kind of activity when you are submitting an economic substance regulation form. So that's a broad outlook of economic substance. So I'll hold up here. I think we have exactly 30 minutes done. We'll get into more on the Q&A. I will look at, just 1 minute. I just stop the screen share. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Nirav and Rajiv, for this amazing session. We have received a lot of queries, and people have already asked that on chat, and I guess Nirav and both of you have answered many of them. So for all the participants who would like to ask the questions themselves, they can turn on the video and raise their hand so that I'll unmute you and you can ask the questions to the speakers directly. Okay, so some of the questions that we have with us. So one of this question is from Kunal Patel. So he's asking, what is the qualification criteria in terms of shareholding percentage for two companies to be called group or a sister company?
I'll take
Rajiv,
Neeraj.
you go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. So, sorry, who asked this question? I just missed the name.
Kunal Patel.
Kunal. Hi, Kunal. Kunal, as we just referred in my presentation also, although the 25% is not being mentioned or not being reflected in the legislation, but there are connecting links. So what we try to look at is FATF defines what are the beneficial owner definition or common ownership definition. And it triggers back to the in-country AML document. So which is what we looked at. The in-country AML document talks about 25%. So if you have a common shareholding between the UAE entity and the group company which you are assessing or from where you are buying, and 25% at a one level, then definitely you get into the attraction of a related party or a foreign group company. Second conditions are if it's a subsidiary, there is no brain because in that case it's anyway part of the same company. It's a branch, it's a part of the same company. If it's a rep office, it's part of the same company. So those are one taken for granted, but otherwise 25% is the standard which we have taken. So this is our interpretation, but 25%, as we say clearly, is not being mentioned anywhere in the economics substance regulation. Neeraj, do you want to add something on this?
No, so let me tell you that even if you may be holding only 5 or 10%, but if you are still part of the overall group, one might even conclude that you are still rendering those services to connected persons. So again, two things. One, the direct holding and the threshold thereof, which, as Rajiv said, is not very clearly mentioned in the ESR regulations, but we go by the commonly referred or benchmarked regulations, and we say 25% is a minimum threshold to kind of connect the two entities. But here again, the law is more on substance over the form. So we'll look at more actual conduct and how you carry on these things and whether you then get covered up.
Yeah, you rightly added up. So I talked about shareholding, and that's definitely the second point comes as a control.
Yeah.
So if you are taking a control because of directly, indirectly, so that automatically comes. So I normally say, like, if a husband wife are holding, let's say 15% shares, can we consider them jointly be holding a 30% share and a common control? Maybe or may not be. Depends if your wife listens to you.
Okay, so the next question is from Athar. He asked that if an entity is importing goods from FCP and it is repacking it here, or assemble the component parts, or imported and unassemble the whole unit, that is a car, okay, and then resells it outside UAE, whether these will be considered as relevant activities?
So as long as you are not changing the characteristic of the product and you're importing and distributing, that's fine. So even repackaging, in some extent gets covered. But if you actually change the character of the product itself and you start dealing in spare parts of the car, then of course that is not covered. But if you import the car and remove one or two component and add another component and sell it also as a car, then that will get covered. So we need to see whether you're changing the characteristic of the product itself or you're keeping it intact. Maybe just changing I imported something which came in a large bulk and I made it smaller packets and I sent it, but I'm still dealing with the same product and doing the same thing, so that gets covered. But if you start dealing into spare parts and not the car, then of course that doesn't get covered.
Oh, all right. So Rajshri asked that if ship brokers are entering back time charters with ship owners and clients, they receive rate difference as the income rest client income is passed to a ship owner. Whether brokers doing this will have to undergo the test. What if these ships are moving both within UAE and international waters?
So whether the ship moves within UAE or international waters is not so much of a criteria. If you are in that business, then yes, but we have to first see again, a lot of this activities we can only comment once we see the exact arrangement between the two parties. Who is taking the risk? who is bearing the risk and who is not, who is passing on the risk at what point. If it is purely broking where you're making the two people meet, you may not get covered. But one needs to see the contractual arrangement and then decide whether you get covered or not. Rajiv?
Yeah, I agree. I think the full question, if I see from this perspective, is one is the ship broking activity we are talking about. I think one core activity or core understanding we all need to bring up is if someone is in the shipping business, it doesn't mean only shipping activity need to be verified. You may come as part of a distribution and service sector also. So we need to look at a very clear perspective. Example, we have seen some cases where people are not doing a real shipping business, but their line of business is shipping. So they looked at a section whether the shipping business activity gets complied or gets attracted to them or not. And they said no, and they're looking at filing the notification as stating as no. However, when we drill down, we identified there are some incomes which is generated by the UAE company from the group, which is not directly with the shipping business, but on account of helping chartering business. So they got some commissions, some referrals. So all those activities also need to be looked at rather than only looking at one aspects of only the shipping or only one relevant activity.
Okay, so she asked that, are we covered if consulting services are provided between related parties in UAE and not to any overseas entities?
That means both the related parties are in UAE?
I guess yes.
I'll give an answer in this way. So if both the related parties are in UAE and you are not connecting anywhere outside UAE, you will not be covered as a part of a relevant activity.
Okay, so the next question is from Ambarjeet. Is there any minimum turnover limit for ESR compliance?
No, so under ESR regulation, there are no minimum turnover criteria. And even a 1 dirham transaction technically gets covered within the reporting requirements.
Okay, so Jasmine asked that is ESR applicable if goods are directly shipped from supplier outside UAE to a customer outside UAE?
So I was wondering why a third port shipment question has not come. So here it is, because this is a standard question which comes in all the discussions. We'll just go back and maybe give a little bit perspective on here. Yes, as per direct distribution service business, we are not doing a distribution business, point number one. But are we doing a service business in this category? In this case, if you see, technically speaking, UAE party or UAE company is not taking ownership of physical goods or goods in the whole process. Ideally speaking, again, this depends on some certain cases from here and there. But if you see, technically speaking, all the documents get shipped, let's say from, in this case, India to Africa. I'm just taking an example. And the BL also moves from India to Africa. The invoices comes from India to UAE and from UAE to Africa. So what are you doing from a UAE perspective? I can answer, you are providing administrative services for the shipment or the activity. So if we go into those lines of providing administrative services, yes, you get attracted into the distribution and service business. So third port shipment, but I can't apply this rule in all the documents. We need to look at how the transaction is being conducted, how the trade is documented. But yes, you may get attracted from a service sector, business in account of distribution and service activity.
Okay, so Niladri asked, the definition of distribution center in the relevant activities guide does not contain the words import and store. Does it mean that drop shipments are covered now?
That's what I answered. From a drop shipment perspective, it may get into the service side. So technically speaking, you have not purchased the goods. You have, on a substance form, the goods are not purchased by the UAE entity. UAE entity is only facilitating or administratively supporting the transaction between, example, in my case, from India to Africa continent.
Okay. So some of the questions I would like to take from Facebook. In the meantime, if anybody wants to turn on their videos and ask the questions directly to the speaker, they're more than welcome. So one of the question from Facebook is the intra-group loan activity within the scope of Ministry of Economy? Intra-group loan activity.
So the confusion arises because the Ministry of Economy displayed the notification format, which does not include the lease finance activity per se. And that's why people start asking whether this is to be reported to Ministry of Finance or to somebody else. And again, we'll await the guidance from them. But technically, if you look at the law per se, you're covered. Now, where to report and how to report, if they have not included in their format and if they want it to be reported to somebody else, of course, they will come back with the guidance. Rajiv?
Yeah, I agree. Because if you see the relevant activity guide also clearly mentions if you have a loan to the subsidiary and there are certain transactions which are being talked about, whether it's a subsidiary or not, still you are getting attracted to a lease finance business. So I think maybe on a hand side, if we see there are three activities which are regulated activity, and Ministry of Finance has removed those regulated activities: banking, insurance, and lease finance. However, lease finance is getting attracted to the general business also, and maybe either they need to amend the form or they will come with a separate reporting in the meantime. I think this is quite a good confusion in the whole side right now as we talk about.
Okay, so I guess we have one of the user who wants to ask question. I'm just unmuting you. You can, hello, can you hear us?
Yes, very much.
Okay.
Rajiv, this is Munangi. You answered this question, but I still have a small doubt. So I thought, let me raise it out on the third port shipments. We have a company which is supporting the group companies from Africa connecting to the world. So that's what the business that we are in. Like you said, the goods move from Africa to various destinations in the world. And technically the UAE company buys those material from the group companies. I would not say group companies are related companies because these are not the subsidiaries. And we sell to various customers in the world. So we don't carry inventory, but we carry the receivables in the books.
Perfect.
Because the responsibility of the receivables lies with the UAE entity. UAE entity is selling. The sales contract is between the UAE entity and the ultimate customer. In that case, does it qualify under services?
Again, let's go into the point by point. So as you said, it's a group company or it's a related company. So I assume you have a 25% plus controlling interest or a shareholding interest between those companies. So that's the first condition which is met. We will take it as a granted one. So ideally speaking, from a straight through what information you gave, you are providing administrative services to the group company for selling in the international market.
But we are taking the risk of the counterparty and the credit risk for the customer.
Yeah, so there are two things: administrative service and the credit risk. Both you are taking.
Correct. So that this falls under the relevant activity. That's what you're saying.
So thank you for giving an answer. So that's where we are looking at. You need to see, we are looking at the pointers. So technically speaking, the information you are providing as we talk right now, the pointers tilted towards the providing of the services, which is taking two critical activities. One is taking a credit risk from, as Neeraj has clearly highlighted, from a group company perspective. And second is you are providing administrative services for the global trade for your group company.
Right, that's true. Either a credit risk or counterparty risk, either of the risks that we carry actually.
Yeah.
See, let's look at the legislation. I think that gives us a good flavor. Why this legislation or why this regulation has come in to identify, are there any? See, you have an office here, you have people here, you have a substance. So that's perfect. So I don't think we need to be worried about whether if I'm being qualified as a regulated activity, I'm caught. No, you're not. Because if you are doing a relevant activity and you have a core income generating activity from that business in UAE, and if you have a substance, that means you have an office, you have people, you have resources who are managing those business, then you can justify that, okay, I am sharing profit with the group, but on efforts. And these are my efforts. We don't need to be worried about that. But yes, if you look at, there are a lot of companies which are just formed as a desk offices and operating in UAE, who are doing just a invoice movement activity from the country. So those companies need to be worried about, not you in that case.
Just one small distinction I want to bring it. I know we have discussed at length. The traders sit in this office in UAE company. These are the people who are scouting the customers in the world and selling for the group. The group companies have no relationship with the customer at all.
Perfect. So you are giving a substance in that. So see, there are two checkpoints. One is relevant activity, one is substance. You are getting attracted towards maybe relevant activity. Now, substance is also positive.
Right.
So no need to be worried in the whole story. But if substance is not positive, then the worry comes.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Nirav and Rajiv.
Thank you.
Thank you, Munangi, for the question. So one more question we have from Facebook is, by way of Ministry of Finance COVID circular, all the dates for notification filing automatically extended. Like DIFC due date is 12 June.
Yeah, but I don't read it as an automatic extension.
Okay.
But they have prescribed a maximum time that by 30th June everybody needs to comply. Whatever has been prescribed by the respective licensing authority does remain. So it's not that Ministry of Finance has kind of overruled. See, Ministry of Finance circular was not actually for the date. They only reiterated that everybody needs to file by 30th June. So they did not extend any timeline, number one. It was more that because of the current pandemic situation, if somebody is not able to attend board meeting, not able to travel, then they will be lenient about that while considering the substance requirement. That is all that they meant, and not actually extension of time. So extension and the deadlines which are prescribed by each licensing authority stands as it is. There's no change in that.
All right.
We read one more thing.
Yeah,
we read
please,
one more thing
Rajiv.
over there. They have said whoever's not defined the date also, for them also is the 30th June.
That's right. So,
that's
it's better. In fact, it's a coincidence that Ministry of Finance circular came in the very next day. Ministry of Economy came out with the detailed guideline on its website. And they also say that 30th June is the date to file. So today we have a situation where a lot of free zones like TCOM Group, JAVZA has not published any deadlines. But by default, by Ministry of Finance regulation, now we know that everybody needs to do it by 30th of June.
All right.
I'll just add up one perspective here, maybe a challenge which we are facing in the market also. There are a lot of free zones which are interconnected. Like if I talk about Dubai World Center or Aviation City, so there are two different free zones, but the administrative rule is one. So whom to send mail also is very important, and we need to look at. It should not happen that we send an email to X regulator assuming it to be the right party. So I think that can also.
But Rajiv, thankfully they had only one email address to send. I agree. So that was perfect.
So I guess we're running out of time. If anybody wants to ask more questions with the video, they're welcome. So last few questions that I would like to take is from the Kunal again. In terms of number of days of core management needs to spend in the country of business operation to provide substance, is this specified?
Neeraj, should I?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no prescribed timelines being prescribed, but in some of the relevant activity, the decision-making days, you should be present. That's a one thing. That means, let's say a board meeting is happening. So one of the board meeting in a year, you should be there. And second comes is, as we talked about, do we have adequate resources available? So that adequacy is again a discussion item against each company or each entity or each business type to prove the substance on that side. So there is no prescribed timelines or days being defined.
Okay. So one of the last question I will take from Arun. If a mainland company is incorporated in September 2019 and has a financial year end as December 2020, will it have to file the notification by June 2020?
Not really.
Yeah, so Neeraj said not really, I agree. However, recommended approach, wherever authorities are asking for email, just write September to December and based on that reply. And that's what you can do maximum, or maximum you can bring up the date till May. You can't say anything what is the futuristic date, because notification is only after the event is completed.
I guess we are receiving a lot of questions. We got one more from Mohammed Rizwan. If an entity doing business within UAE and it has no any other office or branch outside UAE, has the entity required to comply with the ESR?
So first of all, one needs to determine whether it is engaged in any relevant activity or not. If it is not relevant, engage in any relevant activity, then you only have to maybe file a notification saying you are not covered, and that's about it. But every license which is taken from any of the licensing authority, they will at least need to file a notification, is what our estimate is. Whether then they need further compliance, whether they need to justify the economic substance of having an office and people and premises, that depends on whether you're carrying a relevant activity or not.
So I'll just add up to what Neeraj ji said. Example, if you are doing a distribution business, then you need to see the foreign connected party, whether you have or not. But if you are in the business of banking, insurance, you don't need to look at. Even UAE business has to do that substance test.
Even lease finance for that.
Right.
All right, so I think we're done with, oh, one more question. I'm so sorry. Design engineering services will get covered under the relevant activity?
Provided you are rendering that service to a foreign connected person.
I guess we have answered the question. The name is not properly mentioned. So thank you so much, Neerav and Rajiv. It was amazing having you with us. Everybody, you can connect with Mr. Neerav and Rajiv over LinkedIn. I'll provide you the LinkedIn IDs in your chat box. You can follow GCC Fintechs and CA Club India for all your queries. Anything that you would like Rajiv and Neerav to address the community of CA Club India and GCC Fintechs?
No. We just want to say thanks a lot for having us to do this session with all of you. And we are looking forward to keep our interaction on with you all on a frequent basis. But just a suggestion to everybody that this is an important piece of legislation, which is annual compliances, and which can be a good opportunity for the community, So that's about it. But thanks once again.
Thank you. I've shared Mr. Neerav's and Mr. Rajiv's LinkedIn IDs. You can surely go on LinkedIn and follow them. They'll be happy to answer your queries. Thank you everyone for this session.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.